So now you're getting familiar with some of the various project types that you can use in Visual Studio. So let's look at a new project type called a web application. So come over to New Project, and from the wizard for New Project, come down to Web on the left-hand side. You will see an ASP.NET Web Application template. Now, a web application is a way to create an application that runs C# code that's designed to be run on a web server and delivered through a web browser. Web applications have become an extremely important part of how we currently use websites. So instead of just having basic static HTML pages that are styled through style sheets, we can have web applications that use sophisticated programming code to interact with the user, update data, connect to databases, and perform more sophisticated tasks. So I'm going to name my web application First Web App and click OK. And it's going to prompt you for the type of ASP.NET project that you want to create. So there's a couple of different built-in templates. An empty template won't have any content in it. It starts directly from scratch. A web form project is going to be a C# ASP.NET web form, which allows you to create those dynamic websites that you can serve through a web server. And the web form projects are similar to the MVC projects, except the MVC projects follow a design pattern. MVC stands for Model View Controller. And this is a design pattern that is used in different web applications to separate out the different parts of control and the different pieces that work inside of an application. A web API is similar to a class library, but it is going to work through a web connection. So it's going to host that class library on a web server, and then your applications would access that web server and then be able to access those classes. If you're just using a single page, there's a single page application that would already have all of the foundational items set up for you to create that. And then there's an Azure mobile service. I previously mentioned Azure in another lesson. Azure is Microsoft's cloud-based computing system. So you can have web applications that are hosted on the Azure platform. And this is a mobile service. So if you're working with mobile applications, writing mobile apps for Windows or Android or iOS, and you want to be able to access resources on your web server or maybe connect to an external database, this is the kind of project that you would want to create that would allow you to have that functionality. So for this lesson, I'm going to use web forms. And don't worry about filling out any of this. Leave it all default. We'll click OK because I just want you to look at the solution. So don't sign in unless you know your Microsoft Azure password, but nope, no thanks, don't ask. And it's going to set up this project. Now, web projects are fairly large, and it's going to take Visual Studio a little bit more time to create these kinds of projects than it does for our normal Windows Forms or console app kind of projects. But once the project is set up, and don't worry if you get any extra windows, just click Cancel, it's going to launch what looks like a basic web page. So since Microsoft wants to help us along in creating these kinds of projects, then it's going to fill out a bunch of information for us so that we don't have to do a lot of work up front to get started. Now remember, from our project template window, we do have a blank application that just starts with nothing inside, which is perfectly fine when you're familiar with what needs to be done to start an ASP.NET application. But if you're not, then this template goes ahead and provides lots of information and kind of presets up some things for you to look at. So you can see over here in the solution, this is much larger and looks much more complex than our typical solutions look, some of the ones that we've looked at. So in a web application, we have properties and references just like we had in our other solutions. You can see our naming scheme is still the same. However, there's a bunch of other folders in here that contain various items. So ASP.NET applications are based around the idea of having users or accounts or using some kind of authentication. So having our users log in and be able to access certain parts of the website or access certain resources versus users that are not logged in. So the ASPX pages are our actual web pages. So you can see there's a couple of different ones. There's an about, contact, default. And if you're familiar with HTML, then you're going to see that these pages look extremely like HTML that you've worked with before, but it's going to look slightly different using these ASP-based tags. There's some other configuration information in here, such as the ASAX files, which are code behind projects, and config files. So also in here are some various .cs files that contain our C# code, as well as some of those configuration files that are based on XML. So you can see that it looks intimidating, but a lot of these files inside of the project are already pre-filled information, and that's why it looks like there's a lot going on here. But Microsoft gives you some pre-made pages, the about, the contact, the default, so that you can have a starting point and an example for building further into one of these projects. So in this C# course, we won't be using web applications specifically, but it is important to understand some of the various project files that go inside of here and understand that our solutions can get quite large as we build more complex projects. So check out some of the other videos so that you can compare some of the different types of projects that you can create in Visual Studio.